Okay, so picture this. An asset absolutely skyrockets, smashes its all-time record, and it feels like everyone's getting rich, only for it to end the entire year in the red. Now that sounds like a crazy hypothetical, right? But it's not. That was the wild, confusing, and honestly fascinating story of Bitcoin in 2025. It was a year that just defied every prediction and left a lot of us scratching our heads.
So let's just set the scene. We're in October 2025, and the market is absolutely electric. There's just this feeling of euphoria in the air. And Bitcoin, well, it didn't just climb, it exploded, surging to an incredible new all-time high of $126,000. For a minute there, it really felt like the momentum was just unstoppable.
But then the script completely flipped. When all the dust settled at the end of the year, Bitcoin's annual return wasn't some huge triple-digit gain. Nope, it was negative 6.3%, a losing year.
So how in the world does that happen? How does an asset hit a record high and still end up losing for the year? Well, that's the big mystery we're going to unravel today. Welcome to Everything You Need to Know About Finance. And just a quick heads up, this is purely a deep dive for you to get the whole story. It's not financial advice. Now, if this is the kind of analysis you find interesting, do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps us out.
All right, so what went wrong? The most important thing to get right off the bat is that the price drop, it wasn't because of some fundamental flaw in Bitcoin itself. The technology was fine. Instead, you could say the network got caught in the crossfire of a perfect storm of outside pressures.
So let's break down that storm. It all really kicked off with these rising global trade tensions. New tariffs got slapped on, and that spooked investors everywhere, causing this big rush to dump riskier assets. Then, you had this domino effect of forced liquidations. The massive flood of money from ETFs started to dry up, and on top of all that, there was just this general feeling of stress across all financial markets. It was a lot, all at once. And when I say domino effect, the scale of it was just staggering. We're talking about $19 billion in forced liquidations. When that many traders who've borrowed too much get wiped out, it creates this intense downward pressure that's basically like pouring gasoline on a fire. It just makes the crash happen that much faster.
You know, this whole episode really marked a fascinating shift in how Bitcoin behaves. For years, the big story was that Bitcoin was a hedge, right? Something totally separate from the traditional stock market. But in 2025, it started acting a lot more like a tech stock. When the broader economy got nervous, investors sold off their Bitcoin right along with everything else.
But we got to put this all in perspective. A down year for Bitcoin is, well, it's nothing new. Just look at the history of these so-called crypto winters. I mean, a mind-blowing 73% drop in 2018, a 64% drop in 2022. All of a sudden, a 6.3% dip. While yeah, it's not what anyone wanted, it looks a whole lot less catastrophic. It was more of a market correction than a total collapse. But see, that's only half the story. If you were only looking at the price charts, you missed the real revelation of 2025. And that was the incredible strength that was building just underneath the surface, on the network itself.
So despite all that chaos in the price, the fundamentals of the Bitcoin network actually got stronger. Things like the hash rate, which is basically the total computing power that's securing the whole system, it hit new all-time highs. And at the same time, the number of active wallets kept on climbing, which shows that more and more people were actually using it.
And through all that volatility, Bitcoin's status as the king of crypto never really changed. It consistently held on to more than half of the entire crypto market cap. What that tells you is that when things get uncertain, investors tend to pull their money into the biggest, most established asset in the space.
The year also turned out to be a period where the whole ecosystem just grew up. It really matured on three key fronts. First, you had the institutional ETFs, which became this massive, easy on-ramp for mainstream money. Second, Layer 2 solutions. That's tech built on top of Bitcoin to make it faster and cheaper. They saw some explosive growth. And third, we just saw more and more steps toward global acceptance and getting some clear rules from regulators.
And if you want to understand the sheer scale of this institutional move, just look at this. BlackRock Spot Bitcoin ETF alone pulled in around $70 billion in assets. This isn't just a niche hobby for tech enthusiasts anymore. This is mainstream finance making a serious long-term bet.
So that was the roller coaster of 2025. It's a story of external market forces slamming into a network that was internally stronger than it had ever been. So now let's look ahead. Let's look to the horizon and see what people are forecasting for 2026.
First off, where are we right now? Well, here in early 2026, the price has found some stable ground. It's been trading pretty consistently in that $88,000 to $94,000 range. And that stability has kind of set the stage for a whole new debate about where it's all headed from here.
And that debate really has two main camps. On one side, you've got the bulls. They're looking at some really ambitious price targets. Some are even talking about $250,000 or more. They think things like central bank rate cuts could fuel another massive run. Then you have the more conservative view, which sees slower, steadier growth, with targets maybe around 120,000. They argue that as the market matures, you're naturally going to see less of those insane price swings.
I mean, this table pretty much says it all, doesn't it? Volatility is just the name of the game here. Look at that whiplash. A 155% gain in 2023, then a 64% loss the year before, then back to a 121% gain in 2024. The only thing that seems certain is that the next big move is probably going to be a big one.
Which really leaves us with the ultimate question here. Now that Wall Street giants and these massive ETFs are such a huge part of the picture, has Bitcoin lost that rebellious counterculture edge that made it so interesting in the first place? Or is this whole integration into the global financial system not the end of its story, but maybe the beginning of its most important chapter yet?
Now that's a question that only time and the market will be able to answer. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive into Bitcoin's very paradoxical year. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out some of our latest episodes.